Those days in Palestine, I lived in a world of sand, scorching sun, and constant vigilance. Distant gunfire, the thrum of helicopters overhead, formed the backdrop to my life. I was Captain Evans, 45 years old, commanding an Army unit specializing in reconnaissance and security surveillance. 22 years in the military had turned me into a machine. Calm, disciplined, always ready to face the worst possible scenarios. But no training course could have prepared me for what arrived one sweltering April afternoon, hidden within an email. It hit me like a gut punch. The subject line simply read, "Divorce Agreement." I opened it, my fingers still clamped to my M4A1, as if it could shield me from what lay within. An attached PDF, divorce papers. 8 years of my marriage to Diana, ending in a cold, digital file. The laptop screen was hot under the desert sun. I read each line over and over, searching for a typo, a hint of falsehood. But no, it was real. Diana's signature, and a small, chilling line. "We have completed all necessary legal procedures." I was still reeling when another message popped up. A financial notification from our joint bank account. Account balance has changed. I clicked it, and that's when my world truly collapsed. $3 million. Our entire life savings. Money I'd scrimped from my meager military pay, from hazardous duty bonuses, from careful investments we'd built together over the years. All of it was gone. It had been transferred just hours earlier. No, it couldn't be. But there was more. Another email from an unfamiliar address, a strange name, but a subject line that was chillingly familiar. About our house. It was a screenshot of a social media post. Diana stood there, in the living room of the very house I'd once called home. Arm in arm with her was a strange man, a smug smile on his face. Below it, a comment from a friend of Diana's. "Congrats, Diana. Christian is amazing. Your new home is so cozy." Christian. The name was like a knife twisting in the wound. Not just the money, not just the betrayal, but the public humiliation. He was in my house, with my wife, even flaunting it on social media. A surge of rage welled up inside me, a fierce blaze like nothing I'd ever known. I wanted to throw the laptop to the ground, smash it into a million pieces. But military discipline was etched into my bones. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Rage was a luxury a soldier couldn't afford, especially when facing a battle. And this, I knew, was a battle. A personal one, but no less brutal. I closed the laptop, saying nothing to anyone. Gunfire still echoed somewhere in the desert night. But now my battlefield wasn't in Palestine. It was in my own home, in my own life. The past. 6 months before I deployed to Palestine. The cracks had appeared, subtle and fine like hairline fractures in concrete. Easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. Diana began to grow distant. Our phone calls dwindled, and when I did call, her voice was often clipped, hurried, as if she were busy with some important appointment. I remember the evenings before I shipped out, when I tried to talk, to ask about her day, about my own anxieties of being away. She would often just grunt in response, her gaze fixed on her phone screen or drifting somewhere far off. Her smile, once the light of my life, became strained and at times hollow. Diana started changing her appearance. She suddenly signed up for a gym, spending hours there every day, returning home with sweat-drenched hair but a strange glint in her eyes. She became obsessively focused on her looks. Expensive new clothes, secret spa trips, unfamiliar perfumes. I, a man accustomed to the stark simplicity of barracks life, felt increasingly alienated from the woman who had once sworn eternal vows. Along with that came the neglect of our home. The house, once tidy and welcoming, was now frequently messy. Dinners were rarely prepared. Our evening dates, once sacred, were canceled with reasons like too busy or too tired. Diana had once been a diligent wife, always putting family first. Now, she seemed to live only for herself, for her own secrets. I'm not a hot-headed or confrontational man. 22 years in the military had taught me to observe, assess a situation, and act strategically. I didn't question, didn't argue. Instead, I quietly began making contingency plans. I started backing up all our important documents: property deeds, savings accounts, insurance policies. I installed security cameras inside and outside the house, not to spy on Diana, but to protect our assets, to prepare for the worst-case scenarios. I knew she had changed the passwords to our joint bank accounts, but I maintained access through emergency backup methods I'd set up long ago. I also transferred a small portion of my own savings to a discrete account only I knew about. Those actions didn't stem from blind suspicion, but from a soldier's instinct. Always have a plan B. Always anticipate your opponent's next move. And though I didn't want to believe it, my gut told me that Diana was becoming an opponent in my own life. The initial shock of the divorce email and a money transfer had coldly solidified into the precision of a military operation. I lay in my military tent, staring at the tablet screen. Images from security cameras at my house streamed live through a special app I'd installed long ago. Before me, Diana and Christian were laughing in the living room. Christian, a younger man with heavily tattooed arms and slicked-back hair, a look of arrogance on his face. I checked his record. All playboy, with a history of arrests for fighting and disturbing the peace. He was not the kind of man Diana used to say she loved. He was a predator, and I knew a predator never acts alone. Just 2 days after receiving the divorce email, I got a notification from the bank. A loan for refinancing our house had been approved. Diana had forged my signature. She had borrowed more money against the very house I had poured my sweat and tears into and used it to withdraw another $3 million from our joint account. My entire life savings, systematically and coldly plundered. I couldn't believe her audacity. Forging a signature is a serious federal crime, and withdrawing $3 million wasn't just a fraudulent divorce. It was a large-scale financial scam. Clearly, Diana wasn't acting alone. Christian was just a pawn. I knew that to execute such a sophisticated plan, she needed help from more experienced individuals, those well-versed in law and finance. I began collecting every piece of evidence, every email, every bank notification, every legal document related to the refinancing and transfers. I even had recordings of phone calls from the landline in the house, which I had secretly activated to record remotely. In one recording, I heard Diana's voice discussing a house sale plan and quick profit distribution with a man named Baker. Baker, according to my online research, was a real estate broker with a shady reputation in the area. Though my heart ached and bled, the rationality of a soldier helped me stay calm. I refused to let emotions dictate my actions. I knew that to win this battle, I needed a flawless strategy, one that left no room for error. I didn't notify anyone of my return. Even my unit thought I was taking personal leave. I arranged a flight from Palestine to Washington, D.C., and from there, a civilian flight to a city near my home in suburban Virginia. I wore civilian clothes, my hair cut short and neat, and carried a small backpack. My appearance was no different from a typical tourist, a middle-aged man returning home after a long business trip. But within me was the soul of a warrior. On an infiltration mission, I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I checked into a hotel in a town about 50 miles away. As soon as I was settled, I called Frank, an old friend from the military, now a very successful criminal lawyer in Washington, D.C. "Frank," I said, my voice low and controlled, "I have a major problem I need your help with." Frank was reliable. He listened patiently as I laid out the entire story without interruption. When I finished, he said only one thing: "Evans, this isn't just a divorce. This is bank fraud and money laundering. You need the FBI." Immediately, Frank and I went to the bank. With all the documents and evidence I had collected, along with my testimony, the bank quickly confirmed that my signature on the refinancing papers had been expertly forged. They pledged full cooperation with me and the authorities. Frank introduced me to Special Agent Emily Thorne, an FBI agent specializing in financial crimes. She was a sharp woman with a determined gaze and a professional demeanor. I presented the entire story, handing over all the evidence: emails, transfer notifications, security camera footage, and especially the audio recordings of conversations between Diana and Baker. Emily and her team immediately launched their investigation. They quickly uncovered an interstate fraud ring, specializing in targeting military personnel deployed overseas. Baker, the real estate broker whose voice I'd heard in the recordings, was no ordinary broker. He was a link in this network, specializing in identifying homes owned by deployed service members to execute fraudulent financial transactions, then selling the properties below market value to his accomplices for a cut of the huge profit. Robert, a well-dressed man whom I also heard in the recordings, was the one who handled the legal procedures to legitimize these fraudulent transactions. My Diana was just a pawn in a much larger game. Their plan was brazen. They had arranged to sell my house in just a few days before I could discover it and return. They had found a dummy buyer and planned to complete the transaction at half the market value, then split the enormous difference. "We'll need your cooperation, Captain Evans," Emily said. "We'll set up a sting operation right at your house when they're making the transaction." I nodded. This wasn't just about getting my money back or punishing Diana. This was about dismantling a criminal network that exploited the trust and sacrifice of soldiers. The day came. A scorching May day in Virginia. The scent of freshly cut grass still lingered in the air. I sat in an unmarked black FBI van, parked about a block away from my house. From the monitoring screen, I watched Emily Thorne's team deploy. They were disguised as delivery personnel, utility workers, and even neighborhood strollers. Everything happened silently, efficiently, unnoticed by anyone. Emily signaled to me. I picked up the radio, my voice calm and clear. "Activate cameras." Inside my house, Baker and Robert sat in the living room, talking to the dummy buyer, an undercover FBI agent. Diana sat beside them, her face tense but still trying to maintain composure. "The papers are ready," Baker said, sliding a stack of documents across the table. "Just need the signatures, and we're done." "Yes, quick and easy," Robert chuckled. "This profit margin is quite substantial." "It's all been carefully calculated," Baker added. "No one will ever trace it back." Just then, Emily gave the signal. "FBI, nobody move." The door burst open. FBI agents stormed in, weapons drawn. Baker and Robert, their faces contorted in horror, had no time to react. Their hands were still clutching the fraudulent documents. They were immediately apprehended. Diana stood there, witnessing everything. Her face went from ashen white to pale green, then completely devoid of color. Her eyes met mine as I stepped into the room. "No, it can't be." Diana's voice was weak, shattered. She stumbled backward, collapsing to her knees, completely broken. Tears streamed down her face. Tears of remorse or defeat. I didn't know and didn't care. Christian, Diana's lover, was also arrested shortly after at another location, attempting to withdraw the remaining money from a secret account. The case was swiftly solved. With irrefutable evidence from the audio recordings, security cameras, and my testimony, along with the bank's cooperation, Baker and Robert were charged with interstate fraud, forgery, and money laundering. Christian, with his criminal record and accomplice role, did not escape justice either. Diana was charged with forgery, fraud, and complicity in embezzlement. While I knew she would face severe legal penalties, it brought me no sense of triumph. My revenge wasn't about bitterness. It was about justice. The $3 million was frozen and mostly recovered. Only a small portion lost to transaction fees and investigation costs. My house finally safe. I no longer wanted to live in it. Too many memories, too much betrayal within those walls. I used the money to buy a small cabin outside of Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres of land, a creek running behind it, and no neighbors for miles. I decided to take early retirement from the Army. 22 years was enough. I'd given enough. I got a German shepherd named Scout. I started doing carpentry work for locals. Nothing fancy, but it kept my hands busy and paid the bills. My military pension covered the rest. Sometimes I thought about Diana. I wonder where she ended up. A mutual friend said she'd moved back to her hometown in Oregon, working in another dental office, starting over. Honestly, I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't much feel anything about her, to be honest. She'd made her choices, and so had I. One evening, I received a letter from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband was in the Navy, deployed when Christian and Baker tried to run their scheme on her. The FBI had given her my name as part of the case. "You don't know me," she wrote, "but you saved our home. Thank you. We're fighting back when it would have been easier to just walk away." I read it twice, then pinned it to my refrigerator. Some days, when the silence grew too loud or the memories too sharp, I'd look at that letter and remember that something good had come from all of it. Last I heard, Christian was still in prison. Baker and Robert were too. The system had worked for once. As for me, I was finding my way forward, one quiet day at a time, building something new. Something that couldn't be stolen, couldn't be forged, couldn't be betrayed. Something that was just mine.